On this edition of Independent Sources, executive orders, the debate over a program that fast-tracks citizenship for immigrants who join the U.S. military.
The notion that this may somehow put their family at risk, I really don't believe in that.
And Old War stories, the fight to remember the members of the only all-Hispanic Infantry Regiment in U.S. Army history.
It was like most segregated units that they feel that they need to prove themselves as warriors, and they want to be given the opportunity.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Sarah Pizon. This week we wanted to take a special look at immigrants and the military, our way of marking Memorial Day. We'll begin with a look at the Military Accessions Vital to National Interest, or MAVNI for short. MAVNI was launched in 2008 as a one-year pilot program. It allows non-citizens without green cards who enlist in the armed forces to bypass the 5-year residency rule and immediately apply for citizenship without a fee. On the face of it, this sounds like a win-win situation. The military gets people to fill its needs for specific language and medical skills, while immigrants get a chance at U.S. citizenship without exorbitant fees. But there are critics who say that the program is basically an outsourcing of military jobs and creates increased security risks. Zyphus Lebrun spoke with Captain G. Scott Jackson, commander of the U.S. Army Recruiting Company at Fort Totten in Queens, and First Sergeant Chancey T. Crocker, also at Fort Totten, about the MAVNI program.
First Sergeant Chancey Crocker and Captain Scott Jackson, thank you guys very much for being in studio with us today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, great. So we're here to talk about the MAVNI. All right, so for the audience, let's tell them what exactly, we'll start with you, Captain. What exactly is the MAVNI?
The MAVNI program is designed to let non-U.S. citizens into the service, and then, once they're in the service, ideally, right after basic training, they gain citizenship. And the Army employs them across a whole variety of different career fields to fill the force. And it's been working extremely well.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said after basic training. So 10 weeks to citizenship compared to maybe a 5-year period. That's quite a lure for immigrants, isn't it?
It is. However, they're required to be a resident for 2 years, okay, prior to going into the military, and they're not allowed to have a break of over 90 days while they're here for those 2 years. So we've kind of noticed that they have some stability here.
Mm-hmm.
They have some roots, if you will. They've proven to be good citizens, or else they wouldn't have passed the background check and the rigorous process we put them through at the Military Entrance Processing Station.
Mm-hmm.
And so, once they're in, if they get through basic training, then that's just a path to citizenship. And we also, get them to help serve our nation. So
mm-hmm.
It works out good. First
Sergeant Croker. The captain just mentioned the background checks that these individuals have to go through. Could you tell us a little bit about what kind of background checks?
We have several layers of checks. First of all, anybody that's applying for military service, we do fingerprints to ensure, of course, they don't have any outstanding warrants, or they don't have any charges, maybe in a different state. So that's step one. Step two is we actually send all individuals to what we call the MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Station. There, they also speak to a trained security interviewer that does initial questioning and do more background checks. After that, all information is fed into a database, okay, and then a third interviewer also comes out, talk to people that know you within the community, different job titles you've held, to further do the investigation. Mm-hmm. So this 3-step process really ensures that we're getting the best qualified applicants to serve within our military service.
And so as regards to these applicants, I know that with the MAVNI there are specific immigrants that folks are looking for, whether it's because of the language skills that they possess or the technical skills that they possess. Mm-hmm. So what are some of these language skills? We'll start first. What are some of the language skills that the military is looking for right now?
Well, first of all, the MAVNI program has been around for a while. When it first started out as a pilot program, the Army initially looked for skills. Doctors, dentists, psychiatrists, those type of skills that were hard to fill within our military ranks. Because, the Army looks for the same skills that most civilian employees look for. So that was the initial plan. However, because of the success of the MAVNI program, we are now allowing people to fill different positions within the military. So we still look for those specialty skills, but also we give individuals an opportunity to actually get training, job security, money for college by doing entry-level positions also. Right now within our area, we focus on the Korean and Chinese market, because that's what we predominantly see here in the Queens area. But in different parts of the country, whether it's a dialect of Muslim speaking, different dialects. So right now we have 51 different languages that's currently open for MAVNI applicants.
All right, and just for the sake of the audience, you guys, both of you are recruiters in the Queens community in Fort Taunton, correct?
Correct. We are part of the New York City Recruiting Battalion, which covers Westchester County, Long Island, and the 5 boroughs. Okay. But the commander and I are specifically from the Queens recruiting area.
The MAVNI program, as it stands, allows for about 1,500 people to enter through that program specifically, as of now anyway. I know that from statistics, 1,300 of those have gone into the Army specifically. Why is the Army kind of disproportionately pulling in people through the MAVNI?
I can't really answer that. We get our mission, at the company level, we get our mission from from New York City Recruiting Battalion, and they let us know how many available slots there are, from our brigade. And so as far as the bigger picture, who gets the slots and stuff, that's above our pay grade.
Right, okay.
I'll just tell you that there is a lot of people in the Army, so my initial guess would be proportional to the amount of people that you have in your force.
Right, and even just recently the New York Times reported that the number of persons who will be able to be recruited through MAVNI will go up to 3,000 by the end of this year and to 5,000 by next year.
That is correct.
Does that speak to does that speak to the success of the program so far? What, the numbers going up like that?
That is true. Once again, going back to the point that the Army does have a large number of openings to fill compared to the other branches. Even though all branches are currently doing a downsize, the Army still must attain a certain number of individuals that stands ready to fight and engage our enemies. So having said that, yes, as of right now, the slots are 3,000 for this year. And when we talk about slots, the Army tries to resemble America as far as ethnicity, people that, from all parts of all walks of life, all parts of the country. So because this population is on the rise within the country, therefore we are allowing more of these individuals to serve.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that, we've talked about some positive things about MAVNI so far, but there are some critics of the program. For instance, the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies, his name is Mark Krikorian, and he said, quote, "Being an immigrant from a recent immigrant family just adds an additional layer of concern. As we saw with Major Nadal Hassan, who is the gentleman from the Fort Hood shooter, the vulnerability to blackmail also increases if the target has family members outside of the U.S. who can be threatened." What's your response to criticism like that of the MAVNI program, Chancey?
I really truly believe that these individuals that's enlisted now, they come from families. They're really family-oriented, and the whole enlistment process, it is a family decision. When our recruiters sit down with the individual, we just don't do that alone. We go into their homes, we go into wherever they feel comfortable at, whether that's home, church, whatever environment they feel comfortable at. So really, it's, like I said, it's a whole family decision. So the notion that this may somehow put their family at risk, I really don't believe in that. I've been in recruiting since 2006, and all the people that I have recruited or seen recruited, they all are eager to serve. They all are happy at the opportunities that the Army provides, and their family is too.
Right. And speaking of family, when these men and women become citizens, are the benefits passed on to their families as well?
The minute they enlist into the Army, they have certain benefits. Whether they're come into the MAVNI program, whether they're a GED holder, all people that enlist have the same benefits. Now, once they become citizens, then their families are expedited into citizenship.
Okay.
But it's not automatic within the 10-week time frame as the service member itself.
Oh, I see. So Commander, if, for instance, in a case like we were just talking about, when these families are expedited through the process, unfortunately, if something goes wrong, if one of these individuals is maybe lost in combat and so forth, would their families eventually also to get those benefits, of citizenship?
Well, the citizenship is just for the individual who's joined the military, first off. And like First Sergeant said, they'll get the same benefits as anyone else. So obviously, we have a life insurance policy that's kind of inherent to every soldier member who serves, both stateside and overseas. So of course, if that person's married and they have citizenship, then they would get that. Yes.
Right, absolutely. Now, just kind of trying to come back around before we conclude. You gentlemen both, like you were saying, Chancey, you guys have seen people who've come in to be recruited and so forth. What's the sense of have you guys had any, I guess, graduates of the program that you have recruited personally, and have they come back and spoken to you guys? Has that happened with any of you? We'll start with you, Commander.
What we do is we have a program called Hometown Recruiting.
Right.
Okay, so once they finish basic and AIT, they'll come back to our recruiting station if they elect to do so, and they'll go for 2 weeks, and they'll try to reach their friends, people that they went to high school perhaps, and people in the local community. They'll help us recruit, essentially. It's a good program because it brings them back close to home.
Right.
And so sometimes I get a chance to interact with some of the HRAPs, as you would call. Okay, those are the guys who do the hometown recruiting, guys and gals that do the hometown recruiting. And I have seen one or two, not a whole lot, because our percentage of MAVNI HRAPs are very low, because they're very low of a percentage of who we recruit.
Right.
And so the couple that I have seen, they report, they're extremely excited. They've enjoyed their time in basic training and AIT, and there's really not a whole lot of a difference between them and any other ordinary soldier who has citizenship. So really, you can't really tell a whole lot of difference. I will tell you, though, that a lot of our MAVNI applicants have great test scores. They're able to get pretty good jobs and things along those lines, and so they're extremely excited for what lies ahead.
I know that in a lot of cases with the military that there is a citizenship requirement before a soldier becomes an officer. In this case with the MAVNI, are the soldiers who are taken in through the MAVNI, do they have the opportunity also to become officers in whichever division of the armed forces that they enter, Commander?
Absolutely, but it would be through officer candidate school. So once they go in, they are in. They finish up their degree. They can apply for officer candidate school, and then they go through a 12-week course at Fort Benning and become officers. So it's an outstanding opportunity for them if that's what they choose to do, because many of them do come in with lots of college. So
right. From what I had read, it seems that a lot of the applicants are higher educated, like people with their in some cases master's degrees as well are being recruited.
Now, if they do have that specialty skill, doctors, lawyers, dentists, those people do direct commission. The process is just a little bit different because they have specialized what we call AMED recruiters, which recruit for our medical officers.
AMED recruiters.
Yes, sir. But yes, they if they hold that specialty skill, then yes, they come in as that commission.
Right. I just want to go back before we end, Chancey. You mentioned the fact that it's a 3-step process, when these recruits come in and so forth to do the background checks. How long does that take altogether?
When they come into the recruiting station, we have the ability to take the fingerprints, capture those, and send those right up to the FBI. That takes about 72 hours. So while the applicant is doing some paperwork, collecting some necessary documents, those come back. Once that's done, then the paperwork is forwarded to the MEPS, and when they sit down with the guidance counselor, that's done on the spot also. The second layer, security interview, is done at the MEPS. The third layer is done after they actually do the oath of enlistment. Then somebody else screens through the packet. So really, we have people that goes to basic training within 10 days of enlisting.
Right, right.
And
you
that
mentioned
process is done within that 10 days.
And you mentioned the MEPS, just for the audience's sake. The
Military Interest Processing Station.
So, Captain Jackson, if anybody who's watching this program is interested in being recruited through the MAVNI program, where would they be able to get in touch with you guys?
We have 3 subordinate centers, and one of them is kind of like an outlying center that falls up underneath another one. But essentially, we have an office at Elmhurst, right beside the Queen Center Mall. We have an office in Flushing right there on Main Street, right in the middle of Main Street there. It's very easy to find. We have one on Jamaica Avenue, our Jamaica Center, and right on Lefferts Boulevard, we have our Richmond Hill Center. And so every single one of those recruiters have been trained on how to recruit MAVNI applicants. So, if anyone's interested, please stop by.
All right. Well, thanks to you, Captain, and to you, First Sergeant.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Hey, thanks so much for having us today.
All right, great. So up next, Abby Ishola will join Sarah Pizon to tell us what's trending.
Thanks, Ifas. So, Abby, what's trending this week?
Well, the Muslim Community Network is working hard to show Muslim Americans how to become active in their communities while dispelling negative stereotypes about people who follow the faith.
So how do they do that?
Well, the organization's hallmark program, Muslim Youth NYC, gathers several young people together and they train them on how to be leaders. So they do this in a very interactive setting. They sit in the classroom setting and they learn different ways on how to define themselves as leaders as well.
Cool. So how long has the organization been around?
Well, it's been around since 9/11. It started in the aftermath of that by several activists, and they've been going strong ever since.
Very cool.
Yeah.
East New York will be the city's first neighborhood undergoing a rezoning process as part of the mayor's strategy to create and preserve 200,000 affordable housing units in the next decade. This, however, has some local residents worried about their future.
Why are they worried?
Well, they're worried that in the long run, they're not going to be able to afford living there anymore. Right now, the area is very affordable and has a very low density, a residential density. There's still a lot of vacant units. But with the rezoning process, it's going to bring a lot of, new housing construction and a lot of new jobs. And they're just afraid that they're going to get, kicked out of this area.
Wow. So how is the city responding?
So the details on the upcoming rezoning process is going to be made available to the public in early September. And then the community will have legally 7 months to, read the report and make any suggestions and recommendations. So they're just asking to be involved.
So we'll keep an eye out on what suggestions they bring forward.
Yeah.
The first ever Filipino Restaurant Week is underway, and organizers say they want to raise the profile of Philippine cuisine.
Very cool. Who's participating?
Well, top chefs and top restaurants in the Filipino community are participating. But there's just this one thing. They're not agreeing on whether or not they should serve balut, which is a very rare and famous dish in the Filipino community.
So tell us, what is balut?
Well, balut is actually fertilized duck embryo, and it's served in the form of a hard-boiled egg. Basically, you take the egg, you crack the top of it, you take the shell off, you drink the broth.
Okay.
Inside is a little ducky that's not fully developed. Sometimes it could be a smaller duck or a bigger duck. There's yolk inside. So some people think it's a little gross, Americans.
see why.
Yeah. So, some Filipino chefs feel like it's brought down the image of Filipino food.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well,
Yeah.
people are picky about their foods.
Absolutely.
We've talked about this issue before on the show, the lack of diversity in book publishing. There are only 5 or 6 black senior editors at major publishing houses in the United States, and with so few people of color in decision-making roles, bestsellers lack variety. Ebony Liddell is a New Yorker who has decided to make a difference on this issue by creating a new initiative called Coloring Books.
That's cool. What's the initiative about?
So Coloring Books is a bi-weekly newsletter that includes 4 books that are by diverse authors or have diverse characters in them. So she includes 2 children's books and 2 adult books. And really, she's trying to reach as many people as possible and trying to make books by people of color accessible to all.
Wow, what a great idea.
Yeah, and if you'd like to participate in her initiative, Liddell is happy to have people send her recommendations. Visit her website, coloringbooksinfo.com, for more information.
Awesome. I will be visiting the website. That's what's trending this week. Please be sure to tweet us at IndieSources, #Abby and Sarah.
Still to come on the show, commemorating the fighting spirit of the only all-Hispanic regiment in U.S. military history. Thanks for staying tuned to our special look at immigrants and the military. The Burinqueniers is a film that tells the story of the 65th Infantry Regiment. They were the only all-Hispanic unit in American history. Gary Pierre spoke to the film's director, Noemi Figueroa Soule, about the effort to memorialize these men.
Noemi, before we start the conversation, let's take a look at a clip of your film.
Y yo diría que el 65 es parte de la historia de Puerto Rico y es algo natural de allí, como lo es el yunque, como lo es el morro, como las montañas de Puerto Rico. El 65 es como algo que es dueño de la patria. El honor más grande que Dios me ha dado a mí es el haber sido miembro del 65 Mantería.
I feel like it would be my obligation too to fight for the country, even if I'm Puerto Rico. You know, I'm an American too.
I was very glad that Puerto Ricans were on my side. I would not want them to come after me with a bayonet.
Almost 95% casualties during the entire.
Nos estaba llevando a una masacre y por eso yo me negué.
These become the largest mass court-martials of the Korean War.
There was a stigma in the history of the U.S. Army.
With meritorious service to country since 1899, with honors, decorations, and tributes, the Burinqueniers' toughest fight would not be on the battlefield.
Noemi, who are these guys and why you wanted to make a film about them?
Citizen patriots who served valiantly for the U.S. Army. Majority of them came from Puerto Rico, were recruited or drafted from the island of Puerto Rico. That's a Commonwealth now, but at the time in they served during World War I, World War II, but primarily during the Korean War, they had the wartime drafts, so they were subjected to wartime drafts as a colony of the United States. Now it's a Commonwealth. Without the right to vote for their President of the United States, but they still served loyally. Many of them volunteered and were not just drafted. They particularly during the Korean War is where they made their mark as and reputation as fierce warriors.
Was this a unit solely Puerto Rican?
Yes, it was. It has the distinction of being the only Hispanic segregated unit in Army history, meaning mandated by Congress to be comprised of Puerto Ricans. Though there were others that served that were not Puerto Rican. There were Cuban Americans, Mexican Americans, U.S. Virgin Islanders, and some of them were recruited from the U.S., the New Yorkers from the New York area or, Chicago, other places. So they would be assigned to the 65th, but the majority of them came from Puerto Rico.
Okay. Now, looking at the clip, this guy said he wouldn't want these Puerto Ricans coming after him. Why was that? Were they fierce fighters?
Absolutely. They developed a reputation as being very good fighters. It was like most segregated units that they feel that they need to prove themselves as warriors and they want to be given the opportunity.
Sure, the same thing with the African Americans.
Yeah, in World War I and World War II, they really saw no combat in World War I. They were sent to the Panama Canal. In World War II, they also were sent to the Panama Canal and they were sent to Europe and they saw some skirmishes. But they really were not really used until the Korean War extensively.
What about Vietnam?
By then, the U.S. Armed Forces, actually, it was 1948 that President Truman signed the desegregation of the armed forces.
But they still had
the Korean War began with the Army segregated.
Okay.
And as the war continued in the 3 years that the war lasted, they slowly began desegregating. The 65th Infantry Regiment was one of the last units, not probably the last, but one of the last to be desegregated by 1953.
And most Americans don't know about this regiment?
They do not, and that's what made me make the film.
Okay.
I was born in Puerto Rico, but I was raised in New York, and I had never heard of the 65th Infantry Regiment, and I really felt that that was a shame. Also, the Puerto Rican military experience had never really been explored in a documentary format, and they are, many Puerto Ricans serve as a family tradition. You know, you'll have grandfathers and fathers and grandsons, and even now you have a very high rate of Puerto Ricans who serve in the military. But that had not been reflected in any kind of, you know, film format. In films, you don't see that, and definitely not in documentary. So I felt there was a great need.
Okay.
It took me 9 years.
Wow.
9 years to raise the funds. But I got the support of the community, and I really felt that they felt like I felt that it was a story that needed to be told.
How many of them are alive, are still alive?
That's a good question, because we have not identified them all.
Okay.
You know, just last year in June, President Obama finally approved legislation to award them the Congressional Gold Medal.
Okay.
And it is in the process, the medal being minted and designed and so forth. And as we speak, not only me, but some other organizations, this was a grassroots campaign to get the Congressional Gold Medal, are trying to identify how many are out there. I have a database, and there may be approximately 300 that are still alive, but my database is not complete. And they're dying, you know, so at a very, you know, as you can imagine, World War II vets, so now the Korean War vets, even if they were alive when it was approved, many of them have passed away.
Sure. Now, you're also trying to get a stamp
yes.
to commemorate these soldiers. Where are you with that?
Well, it has not progressed. I began a campaign in 2010. There were some other attempts before that. There are other minority segregated groups that have attempted stamps for their own communities, like the Japanese American Nisei that fought in World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen, the Navajo Code Talkers. All of them have been declined. The U.S. Commemorative Committee, that I think is called the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee, they have an unofficial, unwritten guideline that they do not commemorate specific military units. And that's been a challenge, of course, because I guess they're afraid that if they have a stamp for the SEALs, the Rangers will want their stamp. But I feel that these particular units that I mentioned earlier, the minority groups, they're unique to American. They've contributed something to American history and to the integration of the troops and also of society, and that they hold a special place in history. And as such, I feel they should do like a series. And I did receive a letter last year saying that they were still considering it, but you know, we are still trying to pressure them and to gain community support to see if they will also add a commemorative stamp.
Naomi Figueroa Sule, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Copies of the film are available for purchase on the website, theberwynquiniers.com. That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.